control. So yes, we are in a bit of a BTEC setup today, unfortunately, as we'll say someone hasn't shown up for his duty. We won't say his name, Fraser, that's his name. I hope everyone knows. But anyways, I suppose we're just going to get on to the episode. Obviously, I am one of your hosts, Dream, joined again by the ever so lovely Yumi. How you doing, Yumi?
Yeah, I've been good. There's been quite a lot that went well. I hope you had a good New Year's. I hope everyone else had a good New Year's as well because yeah, 2019, big year, big year.
Yeah, well, hopefully anyway, it's gotten off to a decent start. We will just go quickly through on to the first, well, we'll call it a mini topic, which is basically just the, yeah, here we go, the roster change that we have that came after EPS. One second, let me just get my video. Oh, there we go. Alright, yep, so obviously not a great performance from August at the EPS. You couldn't expect much. They are going straight into a game against Endpoint. They put up a decent performance in that. You know, I'm sure they would have liked to do better, but it seems that performance has stirred on this roster change. Obviously, Link, not too long ago, removed from the London Esports organisation, and it seems he's found his home.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a good pickup. I don't know if there's too much to comment on there, just because we still have to see how they perform against other teams, especially like domestic ones. But especially, it's good to see he's found a home after the whole Wind and Rain debacle. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad to see him back anyway, that's for sure. Obviously, he's got an immense amount of talent, and he can certainly show that. It just seemed there was some sort of personality issues in terms of maybe the commitment wasn't there from a couple of the players in the London Esports, but hopefully Link has a renewed motivation as he gets into 2019 under Orgless. Obviously, they're still looking for an org, but I mean, there's so many teams in this scene that seem to get their LAN paid for, seem to get their whatever paid for, yet like teams like this struggle to find an org. Hopefully they'll find that soon though, but we will move on now to our preview of the preview, as I like to call it, for the upcoming Epiclan 26. And obviously, well, we've had some news coming out recently. Smee has decided that he will be attending the event. So far on his team, he has Mighty Max and Rom. As you can see at the bottom there, they are the London Slayers. I think they are recognising who they will find in that final.
yeah, that's not a good. Like, if you were just planning to going to Epiclan, go for a bit of fun, have a few drinks, maybe get out of groups, do well. This hurts you a little bit. It's I mean, yeah, you're attending as a player. This might hurt your standings a little bit.
We were told not to bring that up. You were told not to bring that up. Obviously, Judith Money Crew right in the middle there. If anyone's wondering who Judith is, if anyone's watched Come Fly With Me, that is the character Judith, accompanied by Peter, that we are basing our team on. It's going to be a good time, Obviously, this is the first first LAN I've attended that's not going to be as a caster, so it's certainly going to be an enjoyable one, hopefully. Obviously, we see London Esports have at least got their spot at the moment just below us, obviously, as it will be at the event. As the tier listing comes out, we will obviously be first seed. IGI look like they're going to be attending as well, since they have their full roster. Demise, I believe, is the Dexy team. Ned's, obviously. Ned's is... Everyone knows Ned's. And then Reflex EU, which is the mixed team of Fraser, Whisk, Adam9130. I can't remember the other two, actually. I think I sent you the tweet. You might have that there.
Yeah, no, I'll pull it up real quick just because. Yeah, so it's Link, Adam, Cray, Fraser, and Whisk.
Yeah, so it is basically just the Orgless team, isn't it? Except Whisk is going to be accompanying them there. So I'm glad to see Whisk is getting his go again at Epiclan. Obviously, was part of the winning team at Epiclan 25. It was Ferrari Peakers, obviously, didn't drop a single map. I'm not sure it's going to be quite the same this time around for him, especially when he meets the likes of London Esports and the London Slayers themselves. Well, I mean, it's stacking up to be a good event.
Yeah, I think we skimmed past. I think Fierce are going as well. So.
Oh yes. Yeah, Fierce. I was speaking to KPs the other day. I should mention him, just asking if he was going. They were unsure at the time, but hopefully now we'll see Fierce getting back to the Epiclan after, well, obviously the last Epiclan they attended, it spurred on some changes, and put that roster into a bit of a twilight zone for a bit there. Hopefully they can get a better performance out here. I can't imagine the stipulation for winning will be put back on again. As good of a team they are, I won't go into predictions for the event just yet. We'll save that as it gets closer to the time. But yeah,
Well, I'm actually interested to see Carcass perform online because when I was doing the game on stuff in Lithuania, he was supposed to be kind of like the highlight player for one of the teams that attended. But I don't think he could go, so they had to get a stand-in for him. But the sort of onboard analyst or like the regional professional was basically saying like, yeah, he's an insane player, and it sucks that he's not here. So hopefully, he adds a significant portion of firepower to this lineup, and you get sort of that EU flair that maybe pushes them over the edge. But
yeah, well, I mean, that makes it up to two Lithuanian players now. Obviously, Hype does live in the UK, but he's a former teammate of Hype, played together in the Lithuania team that was in MDL. So, obviously, a bit of synergy there. Hopefully, that does improve the roster from what I've seen of him so far. Obviously, in the show matches, take what that we will from that. Obviously, he wasn't the best in competition, but he seemed like a very competent player. He knows how to use the AWP. So certainly a good addition. I believe we've talked about that previously, but hopefully Fierce can make an impact at the upcoming Epiclan. At the moment, not anyone that I can see as notable as those teams. The Ben Price team, I imagine, is going to be the Descend mix, which are in main. The Medika's under 12. Everyone knows the Medika side, so I imagine people will be keeping an eye on them at the event. I assume there'll be more teams that announce their attendance officially. I believe London have already announced they are officially going. I can't imagine Endpoint are going since Mighty Max is in the London Slayers team. I don't think they've ever attended an Epiclan I've been to, so I assume they're just keeping up that tradition and they'll attend in mixes. But I believe for now that brings our conclusion to Epiclan. Unless you have anything else to add, Yumi?
well, I thought Wong had completely disappeared from the scene, but apparently he's going with a mix somewhere. I see his name on the sheet of people. So I mean, he was there for my first Epiclan. He was somebody I watched regionally, but what mic action? What has gone on with the mic? Apparently something's. Oh, maybe it's something to do with yours as opposed to mine because I'm hearing the stream and I think I'm okay. But yeah, interested to see quite how a lot of these teams fare together. I think most people are just going for a good time, but I don't think they expect to win it with the likes of London, Fierce, and obviously the scary mixed team that is Endpoint and plus Rom Smuya. So are two of the Endpoint players at the very least. So, but we'll hope to see a few more teams come through afterwards. After this, we're probably going to do another podcast just before Epiclan that way we get like a closer, a better look at all the teams, and we could do a more accurate prediction of how we think things are going to go. But obviously,
Yeah.
everything's still subject to change.
I've just changed my mic, so hopefully that's a little bit better anyway. But we do move on now. I assume you can hear me, Yumi, hopefully.
Yeah.
Alright,
Okay.
good. That would be awkward.
Loud and clear.
So now we move on to what happened at the EPS. It seems Yumi's being raided by the police. So obviously,
I don't know if I should answer that right now. I mean, it's like we started late because a producer isn't here, and now I'm getting buzzed through the door. So I'm well, shoot.
would you like me to continue, Yumi? And
Yeah, I'll be right back. If this is an emergency, you'll be the first to hear about it. 1 sec.
Okay, so obviously the teams attending for this event were CEX, London, Endpoint, and that August team that we talked about earlier. London were able to claim the event after a decent best of 3 against Endpoint, but it seems to be a downwards trend at the moment for the Endpoint squad. They seem to be losing out to London quite a bit recently anyway. Obviously they have rotating fifths. What is wrong with the mic? Is it lagging?
All right, crisis over.
Seems to be problems with the mic again. Is it lagging or something?
Hey, what's going on? Sorry, what have I missed?
Apparently the mic keeps going robotic.
Huh. Well, you cover for me for a little bit. You can do some some debugging, some troubleshooting, just to inform everybody what happened. The guy was locked out of the apartment. He's buzzed the wrong flat like 4 times. So, that's great. Could have just looked at the numbers, not buzzed me, but that's fine. But coming into EPS, yeah, obviously we had some great performances from the CEX players individually. I think a lot of people came out of that event praising ZNX because he just had like such an outlandish performance. Obviously, CEX not playing with their full roster was always going to cripple them. So him adding that additional bit of firepower was a huge boon coming into it, but still not able to overcome the likes of London Esports. And then obviously Endpoint 2-0ing Orglus, and then London and Endpoint meeting in the finals. We saw something different than we saw in the Omen UK Open finals, where this time London were able to overcome Endpoint.
Yeah, is that fixed? Does it sound robotic for you, Yumi, or is it?
No, mine's on my end. It's fine.
I don't know why that is, because it should be going directly from OBS. Is it still robotic, or?
Were you like? Did you do a stream where you like cosplayed as a robot? Is that? Am I finding about some underground, something underground off the books?
Fine now. Okay, alright. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. I'm not sure why that would happen, considering it's coming directly from my audio. So, if it does happen again, just tell me, and maybe we'll have to talk about this another time. So we can fix audio. Maybe Fraser will show up then. But I'll continue on now. Obviously, I mean, I think we expected the final for this event. It was basically getting into it. They had the online bracket earlier in the later in 2018, earlier for them. That was concluded with Endpoint securing the Climber Cup, and that all was to be settled now. Already was the prize distribution, and I mean, we'll talk about the London CEX game. Obviously, there was one particularly standout performance there, and that was ZNX, who seemed to go absolutely ham that game.
Yeah, a lot of people, including myself, were very surprised, but by how well he was playing and just the numbers he was putting up as an individual. But it's one of those things where we've seen the CEX side with their full roster kind of have up and down performances, and it's mostly been down in terms of like where they stood within the rest of the UK scene. And this performance by ZNX, although it was good and it was like phenomenal for a LAN environment, it's one of the, I don't know that it's going to be consistent. I'm hoping to be proven wrong, of course, but it's one of those things where he was always going to be a huge source of firepower, but he never seemed to be able to slot into the right roles. So maybe that's signs for things to like improve as they continue to develop and actually get to work with their full five lineup.
Yeah, hopefully that is the case now. Obviously, the other matchup was Endpoint versus Orglus. I think that was pretty expected to go to the Endpoint side as well. The final that we expected was London versus Endpoint. I don't have the maps up quite just yet. One sec, let me just get that up quickly. But I believe the first map, I want to say, was close.
Yeah.
And then the rest of it was not as close as you would have wanted for the Endpoint side yet. So the first map, 16-14 win to Endpoint, so they narrowly managed to get Overpass, which was their map pick. We then move on to Inferno, which was the map pick of London, 16-8, pretty much a blowout on that map, and then Mirage was 16-7. I mean, this is going to set course basically for what we talk about in the next topic as well. Seems to be a certain amount of decline on this Endpoint roster at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's hard for Endpoint because they were obviously one of the only teams, I think, if not the only team in MDL last season. Them coming out of that and then falling, not make it into MDL, or what we're going to highlight in the next topic is the fact that there were obviously relegations that took part. But them losing to London is, I think, the starts of a, if not already solidifying the fact that I think London have at least made an argument that they are the now premier or number one UK team.
I believe now this would be the fourth time they've met, with Endpoint taking Omen and then taking a win in the Climber Cup, and now London beat them at Grosvenor, and they beat them for EPS now. So they're at an even split in terms of against each other, but it's been the last 2 times. No, it would have been the last one time now that London were able to do this. And you've got to remember for Endpoint as well, they've had revolving fifths throughout the
Yeah.
MDL season. They were using Stanley later on in the MDL relegation. So that is, I mean, it's got to be difficult for any player to get anything done as a team when you've got this revolving fifth that you don't know who's going to be next. And then this person can't play, and then this person's going to go to that team, and then he's going to go create his own team. It seems to be concurrent for Endpoint. However, hopefully in 2019 we're able to see some business deals done. There's been some alluding to that, possibly a fifth being secured for Endpoint. I imagine they will secure the fifth before they consider making any further roster changes. Obviously, Neil went into discussion about the Endpoint team and the rest of the UK scene. Still need to watch the rest of that because, you know, it's still good to see there's interest from players who have left. You know, he's been very successful what he's done in Imperial, and then obviously moving on to his next adventure now.
Yeah, I think on that stream as well, what they were doing was that they were just kind of looking through all the top UK players and trying to create like 2 UK super teams.
Yeah.
And I think Smear got involved in the discussion as well, tried to influence him here or there, but
I mean, obviously UK players have a tendency to take anything like that personal, which is understandable, especially when you're mates with someone. It can feel a little bit more of a personal attack. Obviously, he's pretty much everyone he was talking about. He said, you know, I'm pretty much mates with all these people, but this is my honest opinion.
yeah.
And to be fair to him, he gave his honest opinion, and he said the problems, you know, that Shiki would later go into yesterday, in something that we'll talk about later as well. Mitten, you're just spoiling everything today. I am just getting up quickly for the next graphic. Okay, yep. So next we have the MDL relegation, and there we. Oh no, well that's the wrong one. Oh yes, I don't have any pictures for the MDL relegation. But basically, obviously, MDL relegation came up. Endpoint were the only UK team to be featured in that, and Yumi, well, you had a bit of a personal touch. You were there throughout, I believe, most of the lower bracket at the very least, with Shiki by your side. And how did that go for you?
It was all right. I quite enjoyed casting with Shiki. It was one of those things where I got a few messages afterwards where some were a bit curious about how things were going, simply because Shiki is obviously, because he's not a caster and because he's quite close to the endpoint guys. Every time they made mistakes, he was very, let's say, disappointed.
Yeah.
Simply because he knows they shouldn't be making those mistakes. He's constantly questioning why they've done a certain move, or this isn't something they do in practice, or this is something that they've done in practice but they've talked about. It's hard, I think, for Shiki because he's on the sidelines and he is obviously friends and he's oversees all the quite a lot of the practices, goes through all the discussions, and yet there still doesn't seem to be enough like observed hunger, I think is the word from the endpoint players. It's they've been at the UK top of the UK scene for a while, but then suddenly London are formed within the last 6 months of the year, and I'm at least already considering London to be the better side. So there's clearly something amiss here. Obviously, like we had touched on before, the rotating fifth is a huge issue, but I don't think it should be impacting him that heavily, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you could say that maybe they were at the top so long uncontested that it made them stagnant. They didn't want to improve, but I don't know if that's the case. I can't say for certain. Obviously, I'm not in any sort of personal or professional relationship with the Endpoint organisation. I'm not there for the pracs. I don't know their personalities. I don't know what they're like. Neil obviously on his stream as well, which I recommend everyone goes back and watches. He brought that into question, the motivation that some of the players had to get better and to succeed, really. And I think it's fair. It's always fair to bring that up. Accurate. Only they will know. Really, only people who are close to the endpoint players. I'm sure Shiki, obviously, I believe in an official capacity as a team manager. he will recognise if something needs to change. Now, obviously personal relationships can get in the way of that, but I think he's smart enough to know that changes would need to be made if there is a lack of motivation within the team. Obviously, London, they're fiery. They're ready to go. They're ready to keep going. I'm not sure. I believe they are in advanced this season as well. I mean, there's so many UK teams in advanced. Obviously, the MDL relegation. We'll just cover the games now, basically, in what we want to talk about, and we'll make our overall point. So, Endpoint, they started in the upper bracket, as everyone does. They went against their former teammate, interestingly enough, in Robin. For the first game in a 2-1 series. That was decently close, 16-11, 16-10 and 16-12 for the 3 maps. However, Endpoint were able to best the Swedish mix.
Yeah, that was one of the harder games that they would have had to go up against. They, like you said, a bit of a grudge match just because they've got an ex-player playing against them. But then I think moving further through the bracket, they actually lost 2-0 to Euronics, which was that's a bit more of a question mark as to how that's happened.
Yeah, well, with Euronics particularly, they've had a roster that's revolving quite a lot. From when I initially started casting, yeah, I remember covering the Euronics team. I believe that's where players like Keeve, I want to say, came from, and then eventually went back to, I want to say. However, at the very least, it should have been more of a fight. The first map was a complete, it was a brawl. It was a free-for-all for there. 1917, that is obviously incredibly close. It was 8-7 each half, which, it was close to the end, basically. But they did lose out on Overpass, which was their map pick. And then on Dust 2, they just got absolutely blown out. 16-2. There's no contention there, and they should be putting up more of a fight in those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. That's especially when I've seen Endpoint. They've played on Dust 2. They're not exactly the worst team on Dust 2. They know how to play the map, but yeah, as far as I'm aware, Euronics, the majority of the players from that team actually went and made a different team after that. So because of their turbulent roster, and I suppose I don't know if this is obviously all speculation, but I imagine the org may not have been too happy with that. So
Yeah.
they've gone and they're doing their own thing now. So
Yeah, well, good for them, I suppose. I mean, if you do look at the roster, it is a majority German team. It's not exactly a bad lineup. You've got the likes of Schneider, obviously former Fnatic player back in the day. He played very well. Stanley managed to go positive across the series as well, which is obviously incredibly hard when there's a 16-2 game. He had a fantastic overpass, which I think helped. But unfortunately for Endpoint, they were knocked into the lower bracket. But it was not over by a long shot for them. The first matchup they had in the lower bracket was Havu, and I believe that was either the second or first game you got into, I think, if I'm correct.
I joined, I think, purely for the finals. If I'm unless my memory is, I mean, my memory is actually awful, so I could well be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I watched the end of the Havu game.
Okay, maybe. Yeah.
No, sorry, I joined halfway through the Havu series, simply because I remember watching all of the man advantage situations at Endpoint were giving up to Havu on Mirage. So I joined for the last 2 games of the series. They were able to close that one out, and then we got into a very, very weird situation for the final relegation game.
Yeah, so Endpoint versus Havu, it was a 2-1 series, which may make you think it was close, but on any map it was not close at all. First map went to Havu 16-7, second map was 16-7 to Endpoint, and then the final map was 16-5 to Endpoint, which set up their place in the final. That being a Zacho Boars.
Yeah, Isako Boars. Have you heard of this team? Have you seen any of these players before?
Okay, so I have actually casted Zacho Boars on, I want to say 3 separate occasions. However, I'm pretty sure on all 3 occasions they had a different roster. So, I've heard of the team name before, but I know absolutely nothing about them. Only that they are Polish and that they've got someone from formerly XCOM, which I believe was a Patik Guile, or yeah, that's pretty much all I know about them. And it was a game that I expected them to win. That's for sure.
Yeah, it was such a weird affair because it didn't seem like Asako Boras individually were doing too much that was outside of Endpoint being able to win it. It should I mean the series should have gone their way. It just based on the way that they Endpoint were playing individually, the plays that they were making, and some of the advantages they were getting themselves into the mid to late round. But then I don't know what it is, but it seemed to be giving up man advantages, failing 4v2 retakes, failing 4v2, like I think there was a 4v2 post plant that they messed up as well. It's just like there's so many chances for Isaac boards to get into, and obviously if you break the round down for every individual mistake, you're gonna find that regardless of what team you cast or you spectate. But it just seemed to be such a consistent theme throughout that whole best of three that it should have been like a clear victory, but they just didn't come with their A game. Even with the individual like mechanics that some of the players came with to play on that day.
Yeah. I mean, I remember seeing this and thinking, surely they've secured themselves a spot. The first map, 1610, pretty convincing. Was a Zako Boar's map pick as well. And they take it 1610, and that should be a positive. Doesn't mean you're necessarily going to win this series, but certainly going into your map pick, you need to have confidence, and I'm sure they did. They managed to lose over past 1612. It was 8-7 in their favour at half time. Moving on to the CT side as well, they won only 4 rounds and lost 9 rounds. I mean, you're going into the CT side of Overpass. It is favoured, in my opinion. At least it's not. It's not a nuke. It's not a Dusty where the T side is favoured quite heavily. It is quite a balanced map in general. However, on the CT side, you need to be getting more than 4 rounds, especially when it's your map pick, and especially when it is one of your best maps as well. I remember Shiki
Yeah,
saying it's one of their best maps.
it's a confidence pick for them. They're like, oh yeah, we got overpass. Like
Yeah.
it, yeah. Sour taste in the mouth. It's odd, and I have nothing but love for the endpoint guys, but it's just yeah, it's a bit sad to see,
Yeah.
especially because I imagine securing MDL would have obviously been a huge benefit for the UK team. They would have been the only one in the entire bracket. So
Yeah,
for me,
obviously,
yeah.
if anyone is wondering why they were found themselves in this situation, obviously last season they were demoted from MDL into Advanced. They were given this chance again, but it looks like they're going to be ending themselves in Advanced. It would have been a really good start for 2019 for them, really. Obviously, losing EPS wasn't great. There were, again, by Neil M, a few questions about the amount of practice and boot camping they put in. However, I believe there was some valid, in my opinion at least, valid excuse. It's around the New Year's time.
Yeah.
Probably maybe should have gotten a boot camp if you could out, but when people are doing stuff, when they've got holidays booked, when this MDL Climate Cup has basically been thrown on them, a month before, so they do the online bracket, and then suddenly winning EPS means you don't get MDL anymore. I mean, it's very hard to
Yeah.
rearrange plans, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And I think it's fair to be harsh on them in that circumstance, especially from someone like Neil M, who was basically saying, if that was me, I would have thrown out my vacation plans. I would have done this. I would have done that. And that, there's nothing you can criticise there really. Endpoint did the best they could with what they had. However, that brings us to a close in terms of MDL relegations. We now move on to Asus ROG community event. Now, everyone, don't worry, the drama is coming. We will discuss that in a bit. However, we are just going to go through the event just very quickly. It was obviously the reason that we are looking at this was because of the attendance of Team UK, governed by Henry G. The roster for this was Jakey, Russ, Henry G, Tudson, and Isk, and certainly on paper that is a very good roster. I was unsure about Jakey, but I think he played, very well, especially from what I expected. I wasn't sure how long he'd sort of not been playing for. Obviously, I believe he does stuff for ESL in terms of stats and stuff like that. So obviously that you can be a bit rusty, but got rid of all my worries pretty quickly when he started playing. Obviously, Russ taking over the calling role, which I was quite surprised about. I thought Henry G was going to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they practiced with Henry. I think for the first sets of games, Henry was calling, but I think the idea was like just when I tuned into those streams, it was sort of Henry would call until something went wrong, and then Russ would call. As far as I'm aware, or they'd kind of swap between each other as much as possible. But I think the main idea was that Russ was calling for the majority, if not most, of the rounds throughout the event.
Yes, just got to close my door. But yes, that's fair. I mean, understand what they're doing, and especially going from color casting or doing analytical work is very different to IGLing. You have the game knowledge, but it's getting that out. It's your mid-round calls. It's being able to adapt to the other team when you don't have the power of hindsight and you don't have the mini-map and you don't have X-ray. And Henry G obviously played professionally in 1.6. I believe at the early onsets of CS:GO as well. Um, I wasn't expecting him to show up a big performance, but I certainly think in terms of what other captains in the event were doing, I think he did fine. Obviously, Russ. I mean, what do you expect out of Russ? He played well, certainly, especially considering he was calling. There's a couple pretty standout moments, pretty standout performances. Hudson as well. I'd seen him a couple of times in like AL and whatever, CL or whatever, but
Yeah,
he wasn't really on my radar, but he certainly is now. That it was a fantastic performance throughout the event, and I'm just hoping now really that he can capitalise on that and get himself into a good team, whether that be European or UK. There is one
yeah.
person we are missing though. I can't really.
Well,
What's his name? What's his name?
ah,
What's
well,
his name?
okay. This is how you're gonna do it. I was gonna bring up some stats from each of the players, and then we could highlight them.
Go
But
go on then. Go on. You
yeah,
bring up the stats.
yeah. Well, I mean, the team as a whole did very, very well. Obviously, we had three kind of standout individuals. We already talked about them. It was Russ, Tudson. Tudson was the biggest performer, plus 56 across all the games that they played throughout the event. Russ plus 21, and then the player that we're about to talk about, Isk, plus 43. Those were the three that did the best. Obviously, JK and Henry uh, didn't really have to do all too much when all three of these players are doing what they do best, and that's fragging, or I guess in Russ's case, maybe calling as well. But yeah, Isk is one of those players that was a question mark coming into the event because people were bringing up his past, and it seemed like that's to be his future as well.
Yeah, I mean that's perfectly put. I mean, for anyone who's seems that sorry, yeah, there we go. The stream was going into the negative there, but it seems that he's not learnt from the past. And to be honest, I was really hoping that he would prove other people wrong. Once I'm just gonna have to get rid of Yumi's capture just so I can put the screenshot up quickly. So you're off camera, Yumi, for the second while I get the ISK screenshot up. That's all I really want to show people. I think it's important that they,
Yeah.
if you haven't seen it, um,
Okay, my feelings aren't hurt.
let's just okay. There we go. Let's use that, and let's get my best friend Yumi back on. Where is that? And there we go. Alright, yeah, so that is the tweet on screen. The top one is the most important one. I've actually just seen the second one, dog maps. I'm pretty sure that was the maps that were vetoed by obviously his captain for the final.
Hmm.
Doesn't exactly instill you with confidence going into it. However, we'll get into what the tweet says. I'm sure most people can read, but I like to read it out in my head and try and think what he was thinking while he's putting it out. One thing I understood: my future is never going to be with a UK team, apart from one or two individuals. Culture and mentality is way different. I was mainly talking to Team Russia throughout the event. Thanks to Henry G for picking me up, and thanks to my teammates. I'll let you start, Yumi, because I've got some things to say, but I'm sure you do as
Yeah,
well.
I've got some strong opinions. Um, well, there was a tweet actually that before this, like I think it was before the finals day. Um, he made a tweet something like, I don't know why, or he made a tweet about his own performance, and then he kind of subtweeted afterwards or replied something along the lines of, yeah, they keep sending me out first, but I'm listening to the calls. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, but I don't know why I'm going out first. Is the basic sentiment of the tweet. Since deleted, obviously, and the fact that he's said in this one that one, he doesn't like being a part of UK teams, and two, that for most of the event he's not even socializing or conversing with the people from his own team. Instead, primarily talking to Team Russia. That's antisocial behavior, given that you've made one you guys made it to the finals. Like, that's crazy. That's above expectations for what people are expecting. It definitely puts a hamper to the whole like, oh, UKCS thing. Um, but then you lose the finals, and then you make a tweet like this, and everyone's like, oh, there it is. There's the good old UKCS. Because alongside the stigma that UKCS is not good enough to compete in an international stage is also the stigma that UK players are toxic, and he's managed to somehow do both in less than like 100 words.
Yeah. I mean, it's a massive slap in the face. Firstly, to your teammates. I'm not gonna go for it. It's a disgraceful response. I mean, in my opinion, it is, but I think it's probably a bit too far for considering the circumstances. You've been given a fantastic chance. From your past, some of the things you've said, um, practically were racist in some terms. You could argue that weren't racist; they were just meant to be offensive to the other person.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. He wasn't directing it at any individual. However, considering your past, considering some of the things people have said about you, surely now is the time you try and change that. You try and bring it up. Obviously, people had seen the comm stream already, seemed to be declining some call. He wasn't really listening, wasn't getting it through his head what he was supposed to do, and then he goes up out of the event and tweets that. I mean, it's just a ludicrous response, and I think it was rightfully shunned for it. And then on the screen now, I'll get Henry G's response and then read that out. Oh, it's in a bit of a weird place. I'll just put that in the middle. I'm very disappointed in your petulant finger pointing. This was supposed to be a fun experience where you guys could get exposure and show team spirit. You have a lot to learn in becoming a man. I wish you the very best, but the fact you call out Russ actually pisses me off. I think that's a very fair response. I mean, very fair, dignified. I think it encompassed really what we would expect out of Henry G. He's given this guy a great chance. There were several replies from the likes of Smooya, Imi, basically slating him. And before, when he made that tweet after the WHG, I don't know if you remember that, but he said something like G2 were letting him out. They're basically noobs because they were letting him out long dust too. What I understood from that, I thought it was just a misunderstanding in that obviously English isn't his first language, and that what he was trying to say is it shouldn't have been that easy to get out A long. However, now that I look back on this and some of the past things he's done, to me it just looks like someone who doesn't really care about what goes on, and that's fine, but don't it? I mean, it just still blows my mind that you'd make a tweet like that. I don't understand what you get out of that. Surely you understand, no matter what your first language is, it makes you look like a bit of a pillock.
Yeah, and I mean, just the fact that this was his chance, like you'd said, just to kind of clean the slate. Most of the people that were talking bad about him before the event were UK players. Now he's given a stage where, what, 20,000 people watching the finals, or 25,000, or something like that. And then subsequently Henry G tweeting you out. I think Richard Lewis and Thorne have also done a
Yes.
podcast where they mention it as well. Now you've put yourself on this international stage, where people do know who you are. That's going to stick with you for a very long time, and I don't think many people are going to be eager to pick you up in the team, despite how you might have performed, just because it's probably not going to go all too well.
Yeah, I mean, I went through his Twitter earlier as well, and he was still giving it. When the tweet, I don't know if you looked under it, with the announcement of the Epiclan roster, which was Whisk, etc. He basically replied to it just saying, "Nice logo." Fair enough, I suppose. I mean, unnecessary, I think. However, Whisk just replied, "Nice meltdown" on Twitter. Obviously, that got a few more likes. And just seeing Sway put in chat, surely it wasn't racist. Yeah, I mean, that's fair, but what he did call them was monkeys. Some people arguing that as racist. I disagree with that context. It depends, obviously, who he's saying that to, and in the context of it, he was just calling people in CL monkeys, and it's probably something I've screamed out while I was playing CL. I say not at them, obviously, but yeah, it was probably a bit of an overlap by me there. However, like you said, Richard Lewis started talking about it with foreign. Henry G's tweeted, Smears replied. You know, it's blown up in a way I don't think he expected it to, which was unfortunate, because seriously I wanted him to try and prove people wrong. there was a
Of course.
negative stigma around him, and I thought he was a bit misunderstood from the tweet about G2. And I thought, people were giving him a bit of a hard time. Yeah, fair enough. He said some detestable things in the past, but I mean, it's not exactly like the UK scene is uh, the heaven of all scenes where we don't abuse anyone. We've never thrown out this. I don't see people in retakes regularly just throwing out racial slurs.
Yeah.
Stuff like
I
that.
I think most people know not to tweet anything out or make anything public, of course.
Yes.
But it's also one of those things like we wanted that sort of redemption arc, right? Where
Yeah.
uh, you have Ukrainian player in Simple. If he could have been our own UK Ukrainian player with that same sort of, uh, oh look how successful I am. I'm now going to be a humble man. I'm going to change my ways. But obviously, still far and away, still needs to mature in that regard. So
Yeah. I mean, there is still room for redemption, in my opinion. I think he made an apology and stuff like that.
yeah,
However, there seems to be still, in my opinion, I don't know him, a whiff of arrogance about him personally, and I think that tweet showed that that's in there. And he basically tweeted saying, "This game brings out the worst in me," and whatever. So
yeah. It's not my fault. It's the game. It's some
not good enough.
undertones in there. Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's not good enough there. I mean, I in the past, I've had problems with raging and toxicity, and believe me, that is commonplace in the UK scene. But it's not exactly. Firstly, it's not the scene's fault, because most people do discourage toxic behaviour, and it is a kind of way of saying I'm kind of at responsibility, but it's actually playing CS:GO. It's plugging ESEA with those morons that brings out the worst in me.
Mhm.
Obviously, it's unfortunate that the circumstances have occurred, and now what we really need to do is move on. He needs to take a little bit of a break. I believe he's playing with Swaggy or
Yeah.
whoever at the moment, and just keep grinding it out. And if he does want to succeed, he's gonna have to temper his behaviour. Obviously, no, I wish him good luck in that regard.
Also, just as a side note,
Yeah,
if you do make poor tweets, I'm just gonna be honest, just stand by them. If you make poor tweets and they get attention, people are going to screenshot them anyway, and then it just makes you look like this person that doesn't stand behind your words. Like the fact that we have to constantly refer to screenshots from him, and he just constantly makes says things on Twitter, maybe thinks about it a day or a week later, and he's just like, oh yeah, probably shouldn't have said that, and then deletes it. It's kind of like, okay, it's been up for a long enough time. People have taken their own screenshots and are going to hold that against you in the future. It's
yeah. I mean, I understand with the reasoning he
yeah,
obviously deleted it.
yeah, of course.
I think that's obvious to everyone why he has. Um, and
But don't say anything that you're gonna want to delete later. It's my
I
it's
know.
my moral of the story.
Exactly. I made sure that when I was using my Twitter account, especially when I first started getting into casting, I love to give it as much as anyone in the UK scene, and sometimes that involves words that wouldn't exactly look good. Certain words that are typical of UK, BM basically. But I had the sensibility to either go into my past and delete those tweets, or what I like to do is I'll give a tip to anyone who's toxic. If you're in a pug and someone, as someone usually does, annoy you, just start typing it out. And as soon as you start typing it out, you can type whatever you want and just don't send it. Delete it straight after. That's what I do, and it makes me feel. I don't know why, it just makes me feel so much better. However, after 40, nearly 45 minutes, that leaves. I'm on a seizure, I think.
Yeah,
My brain
yeah,
just.
yeah. Just take a break. But I think what you're trying to get to is after 45 minutes, we did start a little bit late, but I do think we've ran through all the topics that we planned to do for today.
Yes, I believe so.
There's
That
still
was.
more
Yeah.
stuff to come. Hopefully, we've got MDL kicking off. We've got
Yep.
Advanced kicking off. We can kind of touch base with a few of those teams when they get some results or maybe a lack thereof. But yeah, I think that's it. We'll obviously try and do more accurate Epiclan stuff as well. I
Yeah.
think Grosvenor have season 2
Oh, of
coming up.
course. We forgot to mention that. We mentioned Grosvenor obviously. But again, congratulations to Epiclan for continuing their partnership with Grosvenor. I mean, it's certainly going to be as good as last season, I hope. It seems like they're willing to make improvements. The people at Grosvenor, obviously, it was held in all their casinos. Still unfortunate that it's, you have to be 18. However, I'm willing to take that, obviously. But we'll wait and see. We'll obviously do a preview of that when it comes out. Epiclan 26 next month in February. Both me and Yumi will be attending the event in professional and leisure placements. So
Wait, are we making a team? Is that what's happening?
well, you're the professional, I'm the leisure.
Oh, I see.
Well, okay. Well, I'm sorry.
We'll see how everything pans out.
Yeah.
If neither of us gets goes in a professional capacity, we can always just try and give it to Endpoint or London or something.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways, thank you for joining us, and obviously, again, apologies for the production. It's done solely by me, and I've not exactly got a great track record, and of course, with the microphone issues, not sure what was going on there, but hopefully for next episode, those will be fixed. Again, thank you for the continued support into 2019. Hopefully, we've got some new things coming soon. So as the kids say, watch that space. Thanks, everyone.